We got into outreach with the assumption that we have to debate people. But what if we made them tell us the reasons why animals don't deserve to be abused?
What is it in the first place about animals that makes you feel like they shouldn't be abused? Like they're birds. Because they're living?
They're living things.
I mean-
We're living things too. They don't abuse us, so why should we abuse them?
KFC. Tastes amazing, right? Why would they decide to go vegan?
I guess because you have like a noble goal in mind.
I watched hundreds of hours of outreach from creators like Joey Carbstrong, Earthling Ed, and Hudson Talo. I started to memorize the things they would say and copied them and found different results from different kinds of approaches. I always noticed an underlying theme of how the best conversations were progressed, but I couldn't put it into words until I translated it into the three-phase structure that I call the EAR framework, or AIR framework. I got good results from using my AIR framework in general cube outreach situations, but I found that I had to miss out on a lot of them because I had no idea whether the person I was talking to was actually against animal abuse. Why was I investing the time in someone who stopped to watch the footage when I didn't know whether they were for or against animal abuse? I wasted a lot of time on people who I thought were curious but I knew wouldn't change. I thought to myself, if I could separate out with a filter all the people who were against animal abuse and only talk to them, my outreach experience would be so much better. On top of that, what if I didn't have to hold a TV screen for hours? If I could instead just focus on what I loved, these meaningful outreach conversations. Our outreach team at the time was small, so we always needed at least 4 people, and even that was becoming a rare occasion. I watched through more debate videos of my favorite outreaches, and I had to consider, is this something I actually want to do long term? Do I want to keep arguing with people? That's when Earthling Ed shook the outreach space with his most controversial sign. The people's reaction to this was pretty intense. To me, the sign read, "Not abusing animals is a moral obligation." And within that thought, this whole idea was born. I thought, why not just do the opposite? What if I proposed that abusing animals is a moral obligation? Instead of telling people that animals shouldn't be abused or slaughtered, I came up with this sign. The reaction to this was unbelievable. I had people coming up to me, telling me all the reasons why animals don't deserve to be abused. I didn't have to beg them to empathize with animals. I didn't have to point out how good it was for the environment or their health, and I found more people who cared with their hearts about animals. And those were the people who I wanted to talk to. And they all sounded like vegans with this approach. Someone special noticed what I was doing. Joey Carbstrong tried out the method and found so much success in conversations that really shocked him. What the people were saying to him was mind-boggling.
That's right, changing the hearts and minds of people in a very brilliant and intelligent way. And I just think
Do you like the reverse psychology?
I think it's amazing, yes.
Everyone in the comments section loved it too. Another legend joined in and had amazing conversations as well. I want to teach you how to get these exact same results, but I have to admit something about this method. If you go out with a sign like this and expect to get the same results that I've showed you, you'll be disappointed and people will probably misunderstand you and think you're even more crazy than they probably think you were in the first place. There is a framework to applying this reverse psychology method that I will teach you, alongside with the specific questions and exactly why I use them. The difference with reverse psychology is that it gets a lot of attention from everyone, but better than that, the people who engage with you are people who are angry with animal abuse. They are exactly the kind of person who you want to be talking to. There are 2 main reasons why the reverse psychology method is so effective. It sparks more intrigue from the public as a whole, and it grabs a lot of attention. And you automatically talk to people who have a passion for protecting animals. I've put my 3 years of experience in this guide for you, because I know that this tested method will help you aid the people who are ready to change, and help you enjoy your outreach more and get better results. I've developed a sequenced set of key questions to direct a conversation. In this guide, I will teach you how to use the reverse psychology method of outreach, the different styles in which you can utilize this approach, the 3-phase framework that this approach is built on, and how to get people to tell you the things you want to say to them. On top of all of that, I've created a wiki page in Notion, which contains a bunch of resources to help you after this video. Inside it, you will find further in-depth explanations on the EAR framework, equipment checklists for each style of outreach with links to what I use and recommend, a template for you to add your own custom questions to my framework, a 4-minute video refresher on the key questions you can watch before events to see how these questions are used in a more natural setting, and what I'm most proud of is the key questions cheat sheet. It will show you how to deal with every kind of response you will get from the questions you ask. And I've adapted a simplified version of this to save to your phone when you go to these outreach events. Out of all the outreach conversations I've seen, from the greatest themselves and from my own experience, I noticed an elusive theme that carried out in each successful discussion that they had, but I couldn't see it as clearly as I do now. 3 years ago, I had copied the exact same questions or statements my favorite outreachers used, and expected to get similar results. But my conversations were terrible compared to theirs. I watched my own outreach recordings and compared them to the reference videos to make sure I was saying the right things, and I was. So it didn't make any sense. The most frustrating thing is that I copied the things that they said perfectly, but my conversations didn't go the same way. I knew there was a crucial piece I was missing, so I sat down and watched these videos and compared them and actually wrote out each line that they asked and how they sequenced them, and compared them across all of these videos. And that's when the patterns started aligning. While these outreachers were kind enough to show and tell you what they would say, they never mentioned the crucial element that contributed to their success. When they would say something mattered even more than what they would say. That's when I broke the surface of that underlying theme that I noticed from the start. It wasn't the specific questions that these outreaches used that made people change. It was about asking those questions at a specific phase of the conversation. I experimented for 6 months using different questions to purposefully elicit different responses. This is where I discovered the 3 phases of the framework. I kept the questions that drove the conversation forward and got rid of all of the waste and drafted the EAR framework that I'm teaching you today. I got to the point where I could ask a specific set of questions in a sequence and I would be able to predict exactly how the other person would respond in each scenario. This meant that I was less stressed about what the other person might say and became more confident in my conversations. My conversations went from 30 minutes of waffling, producing no change of heart, to 10-minute life-changing conversations, and sometimes animal life-saving ones. In this guide, I will teach you the secret 3-phase structure that these legends use, but don't tell you about. And while utilizing this reverse psychology approach, I'll teach you the key questions that you need to drive the conversation forward through each phase. On top of that, I will show you the goals of each key question we use so you know exactly how, when, and what to say in every interaction. With practice in this method, you'll be able to predict the responses that you'll get to the questions and reply accordingly. Before I learned and applied the structure, these were the symptoms that I had from my bad conversations. I was filled with anxiety because I always prepared for the worst, and I only thought about how to counter-argue with people. If the person said they were an animal lover, I quickly jumped into resolutions, but then I would end up in looping arguments. I felt like I had failed people who were ready to talk, but I didn't know how to lead a conversation. I spent 30 minutes to an hour in heated debates with people who I didn't know how to close out conversations with, and I didn't realize that they weren't the right people to talk to in the first place. And ultimately, I had a few bad experiences like this that almost led to me giving up completely. By the end of this course, you will understand the fundamentals of why reverse psychology is so effective and how to make every conversation you have fulfilling, succinct, and structured. Let's look at the different ways that you can set up a reverse psychology event and run through the pros and cons of each of them. The first is a simple sign. It can be lonely, but there is no need to rely on others. It's really easy to set up and it's low cost. You could try a debate table as well. People are more reluctant to sit down and talk, and it does have a medium cost, but the quality of conversations is much better, and you can set up solo with the right equipment. And my favorite is the TV stand and sign. It does have a high setup cost, and it needs 2 to 3 people to set up, but it has huge impact potential, especially when using 2 stands and a big team. It attracts the most attention of all of these styles, and you have footage to reference what you're talking about. Plus, no one has to hold signs or TVs. You can just focus on outreach. There are 2 ways that you can approach this reverse psychology method. My style is the devil's advocate approach. For my personality type, this is the most fun approach to outreach. By following the EAR framework, I can easily act like I'm a person who legitimately thinks animals deserve to be abused and make other people do all the outreach work for me.
Can animals take people to space? Don't think so.
Feel any sympathy for them, but if that was a human in that situation,
Yeah,
there would
definitely.
be so many punishments.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
But I have to put a disclaimer. This approach is only suited to people who have a similar personality type to me and who can handle that kind of confrontation. But to me, the end result is the most rewarding when I have people do a complete 180 on their opinion of me and they end up making a positive change. I won't be teaching the devil's advocate approach specifically because I left that in the guide in the Notion wiki page. The next approach is what this guide is focusing on, and everyone can do it. It's the conversation starter approach. This will be the most common use case for this reverse psychology method. Asking someone whether or not they agree with the sign is the easiest way to start any of the outreach conversations you'll have with this event. You base your conversation on two people acknowledging this truth of society and figuring out what to do about it. However, getting the best results won't happen if you just use the same sign as me. Now I'll teach you the EAR framework to apply this method, and I'll help you understand the fundamentals of why this is so effective. Within the framework, the three phases are the establishment, argument, and resolution. The colors resemble a traffic light, but with a swapped order, because the rules for how we drive the conversation are similar. Treat it like a traffic light. In the establishment, first we start slow and build on their empathy. Then in the argument, we stop when we need to address things holding the other person back. And finally, in the resolution, we go when they understand that their values and actions are misaligned and they need guidance. We're going to deep dive through each phase linearly, and this is how it will work. We will overview the phase, starting with establishment. We will discuss the goals of the phase. We will deep dive into each goal individually, giving insights. We'll cover the questions linked to the goal. I'll show an outreach example of that question. Then I'll break down what the question is achieving and move on to the next goal or question and repeat for each phase. The framework has a really easy structure in which each phase has a couple of goals and each goal has a question linked to it. Let's start with the most important phase of the whole framework, which is the establishment. To summarize it in one sentence, it's about confirming the person has empathy for animals, is against animal abuse, and understands ethical veganism. Before we get into talking to someone about becoming vegan during outreach, we want to meet certain goals to build the base of an effective conversation. Treat the establishment stage as a filter that only lets you have meaningful conversations with people who are open to the animal rights message. If they answer these questions honestly, you will know that you can continue to have a productive conversation. Here are some important notes on the establishment phase. Try your best not to use the word vegan right at the start, unless the other person mentions it. This is crucial to the reverse psychology method. Please don't misunderstand me. I have no problem with the word at all, but it will get in the way of the conversation because of what people think the word means. The common conception that we should expect from people is that vegans are the ones who eat vegetables because that's what vegans do. We need to make it clear that being vegan is about being against animal abuse and exploitation. I've implemented key questions later in the phase that will help them come to this conclusion without you having to tell them. Another note is that the establishment should make up 80% of your conversation. The key questions I teach are specifically to progress the conversation. If you look deep into the responses in the key questions section on the wiki page, you will see all of the different extra questions that I suggest you use to build on the person's empathy. If you only follow the key questions in the establishment phase, you will not get the results that you're looking for. Remember, each key question is focused on progressing the conversation forward. This is fine for the argument and the resolution stage, but for the establishment stage, you need to spend 80% of your time drawing out the other person's sense of empathy for animals and helping them bridge the gap between their empathy for animals who traditionally have rights and for animals who are farmed. If you're a complete beginner and feel like this is a bit overwhelming, that's okay. Think of this whole structure as a vertical stack of blocks creating a tower. Each question is a block, and a good conversation looks like this. Each block represents a key question. The base is built wide with the establishment and holds the argument in place. Then we use the resolution to help build a higher level of consciousness. You can learn the structure one question or one block at a time and slowly chain the blocks together. With that said, let's go over the goals of the establishment. There are three main goals and they function to establish that animal abuse is wrong and the person is against it, to ensure the person is aware that they cannot demand animal abuse and be against it at the same time, and to explain why animal rights needs veganism. For goal number one, animal abuse is wrong and the person is against it, the first thing we need to do is make sure we are choosing the right person to talk to. You can judge someone's level of empathy they have for animals by their answer to these questions, and we need to build that up as much as possible. The most important part about the establishment is to use what you have learned to better understand the person, but also remind them of the values that they have for animals already. At the start of the conversation, introduce yourself with a smile and a big hello, and then ask them this first question. Do you agree with the sign, which says animals deserve to be abused?
What do you think about this sign in general, though? Animals deserve to be abused. Would you agree or disagree? It's quite easy to disagree with that one, eh?
With this question, we want to ensure that we are talking to someone who is against animal abuse before we invest more time with them. This is usually a quick no that they don't agree with the sign, but they may elaborate on their statement, so take some time to listen to this. In the rare case that they say that they do think animals deserve to be abused, this is your first big sign that they are the person that you don't want to talk to. The second question linked to this goal is, what is it about animals that makes you feel like they shouldn't be abused?
What is it about animals, though, that makes you feel like they shouldn't be abused?
Well, they're so innocent, aren't they? You know, interesting.
The most innocent creatures, eh? Yeah.
This question is about understanding the different types of intrinsic values that person has for animals and using it for future reference. The next question is, how does it make you feel when you're watching animals suffering?
How does it make you feel when you're watching animals going through that? It's not nice, eh? Yeah.
Our purpose with this is to figure out where their empathy comes from. They will say things like animals are so innocent, or they might tell you about an experience they had of witnessing an animal in pain. Before moving on to the next goal, keep asking them questions about these experiences. The more time you spend here, the easier the rest of the conversation will be. When you first start using this method, just try and memorize these 3 questions together and then forget about everything else. And then you can start to learn each other question in chains like this. Moving on to goal number 2, which is to ensure that they are aware that they cannot demand animal abuse and be against it at the same time. Having empathy for animals is not enough. We need to verbally confirm with them that they are against animal abuse. If we can get them to confirm this, it's a good sign that the person is the right kind of person that we want to talk to. Most people will say that they are, but their actions won't align with those beliefs, but we'll build on that later. What I mean by empathy is not whether they love animals, but whether they can consider the victim's perspective. They may not love animals like chickens, but they can understand that putting them through abuse or exploitation is morally wrong. First question for this goal is, what industries do you think are abusing animals?
What industries do you think are abusing animals in these situations?
Pigs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sausages.
Yeah. Biggest culprits would be meat, dairy, and egg industries, eh?
Focusing on the Socratic method, we want them to come up with the conclusions that we would like to tell them. We want them to understand for themselves that the industries that provide animal products are the exact industries that are abusing and exploiting animals. This question is leading into the relationship between buying animal products and supporting animal abuse. You will see how important this question is in the setup for the next goal. The next key question is, would you say that you're against animal abuse?
Would you say that you're against animal abuse? Yeah. How strongly do you feel about that? Like maybe on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, 10.
10. Wow, that's very strong.
Directly linked to the goal, we're trying to establish if the person is against animal abuse. If they were to say that they could care less, I would not spend any more time investing in this conversation. The next key question should come immediately after. Do you think you could truly be against animal abuse while paying those industries to abuse animals?
But yeah, the thing is, do you think that you could truly be against animal abuse while paying people to abuse animals for you, for animal products?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, probably not, eh?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, because it's easy to say that you're against something, but your actions determine your values, eh?
This is a question that I see outreachers wanting to state themselves instead of asking the other person what they think. If you followed the questions beforehand and the person is the right fit for the conversation, it's very likely that they will confirm these questions with you. Even if you did state a lot of true things, people are more likely to believe what they tell you instead of what you tell them. With their response, we complete goal number 2 and then move on to goal number 3, to explain why animal rights needs veganism. This is where you can finally introduce the idea of veganism and clarify its meaning. So far, we have established that they have empathy for animals and they are against animal abuse. Now we naturally come to a discussion on being vegan. The first question, which is set up by the previous questions, is, since you know which industries are abusing animals, and you've told me that you're against animal abuse, What do you think you could do if you no longer want to support animal abuse?
You know which industries are abusing animals, and you've told me that you're against animal abuse. So what do you think you can do if you don't want to support animal abuse anymore?
Well, yeah. Don't eat meat.
Yeah, to boycott the industries, eh? Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
This is my favorite question within the whole sequence, because all of these questions in tandem build up on one another. You wouldn't expect people to come to the conclusion of veganism, so that's why the next key question immediately follows that up. Can you think of any lifestyle that aligns with people not using animal products for the sole reason of avoiding animal abuse?
Can you think of any lifestyle that aligns with that philosophy of avoiding animal products for the sole reason of avoiding wanting to support animal abuse?
Yeah, because veganism.
Veganism, yeah, straight up.
Usually I'll get responses like don't eat meat or be vegetarian. The good thing about this question is that we can predict the responses that we will get and be more confident in what we're going to say in return. If they don't really get it or need a little help, be patient. This is our chance to guide them through that process and complete that goal that we're trying to achieve. Once we both come to a conclusion of veganism, we finish the last goal of the establishment stage. Now that we have completed these goals and landed at the conclusion of veganism, now we move on to the argument stage. Every single establishment goal must be met before the argument. This doesn't mean each question needs to be asked, but each goal needs to be achieved. If the other person tries to start the argument earlier, this means that you just let them have their say, wait for them to finish, and then carry on back to the establishment stage that you were at and progress from there. One sentence to summarize this stage is to confirm the person knows if they were the victim, they would want someone to go vegan for them. This stage is to address any arguments the other person has, but it is not a space for us to argue with the person. The more time you spend in the establishment stage, the less time you will spend in the argument. This is because if you build up that person's empathy for animals so high, it will be really hard for them to turn their back on all the things that they said in any kind of argument. If you haven't built on their empathy, it will be really easy for them to bring up a lot of arguments. The reason why this section is so short in the guide is that if your goal is to be a great debater, this guide isn't for you. I love outreach, but I hate arguing, and that's the whole reason why I created this in the first place. The framework and the reverse psychology approach combined are optimized to avoid draining arguments and focus more on the animals. Goal 1 is to ask the person specifically what's stopping them from being vegan. The more time you spend on the establishment phase and building upon why that person is against animal abuse, the less likely they will come up with any of the stereotyped arguments that we've heard online. Again, our objective is not to argue. Our objective is to address the arguments the other person has and relate it to what they were saying in the previous phase about how they had values for animals and were against animal abuse. The question linked to this goal is, what is stopping you from living a lifestyle that doesn't abuse animals and adopting a vegan lifestyle?
So what do you think's the biggest thing stopping you from living a lifestyle that doesn't abuse animals and adopting a vegan lifestyle?
Well, just selfish tastes, really, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I like cheese.
Yeah, and I was the same. Thank you for being honest.
All we want from the person is honesty. We don't necessarily want to jump in and fix that person's barrier to being vegan, but usually we move on to the question in goal number 2. Goal number 2 is to dismiss arguments by putting them in the victim's position. Our goal is to redirect the conversation towards empathy instead of logic, not to argue. This is why I mentioned in the previous goal that we're not trying to fix them after they tell us the barrier that they have. We use logic to conclude with empathy. We do not use logic to conclude with logic. Saying something like, you wouldn't say that for X animal, so why would you say that for farmed animals? This is trying to use logic to come to a conclusion of logic. They shouldn't eat farmed animals because there is no difference. This is logical, yes, but the person does not understand it like this. Instead, ask them, do you think that consistently for all animals? With their reply, they will point out the difference between animals. Instead of immediately debunking the difference, find out where their empathy comes from. See if you can bridge the gap of empathy between the two animals. This is what I mean by using logic to conclude with empathy. I have more examples of this in the key question section in the Notion Wiki document. The question linked to this goal is, what would you want someone to do if you were in the animal's position?
Really great question for you would be, what would you want someone like yourself to do for you if you were one of these animals? Would you want someone like yourself to change very slowly?
No.
You would want someone like it. Yeah, because you'd be suffering so horribly, right? Yeah.
In Simon Sinek's seminal book, Start With Why, on how values affect our decisions, he emphasizes focusing on why instead of what. Previously in the conversation, someone might have mentioned the barrier of not knowing what to eat. I see so many outreachers seeing that response and jumping in and telling the person what to eat and expecting them to change, but they don't. It's because we are not logical beings, we are biological. Our values drive our emotions, which drive our actions. In summary, you do not need to dispel every single argument to complete this stage. They may leave the conversation having no idea what to eat next, but the values that you've brought out of them will drive their emotion of empathy to find a way. If you can get the person to think about the animals before their own barriers, then you can complete the argument phase and move on to the resolution phase. You must complete both phases entirely before moving on to the resolution stage. Again, not specifically the questions you ask, but more importantly the goals of each of these phases. One sentence to summarize this stage is to explain the clear moral obligation of veganism. Our progression so far is that we have confirmed the person has empathy for animals, is against animal abuse, and they understand ethical veganism. They know if that they were the victim, they would want someone to go vegan for them. Now, we show them the actions of someone who holds the same values as them. Goal 1 is to explain ethical veganism and its distinction between mainstream veganism. Veganism means so many different things in mainstream media. We should assume the person misunderstands what it's really about and ask them what they think about it and then correct them from there. We do this using extra questions for them to think about. The linked question to this goal is, what do you think is the best benefit of being vegan?
Yeah, would you like to know the best benefit about a vegan lifestyle?
Well, probably health-wise.
You think so?
I do, actually, yeah.
Do you think that you could be unhealthy as a vegan if you ate vegan junk food all the time though?
Oh, I guess so.
Yeah, veganism isn't really much to do with health of the environment.
Yeah.
It's an ethical stance.
Okay.
Yeah.
With this question, we already assume the person is going to give the wrong answer. This is why we ask them further questions to lead to that conclusion like I did in the example. The goal is complete when they understand ethical veganism. Goal 2 is to ask them if they will continue to abuse animals. The goal of this is not to make them say that they will go vegan. It is a space for them to reflect on what they will do based on the values that they have told us they have. The linked question is, what will you do moving on from this conversation?
So what do you think you're going to do moving on from this conversation?
Oh, I don't know. I'd like to sort of look into, sort of veganism a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they say that they're going to make a change, that's great. But if they say that they won't, then it's okay. If you've done a good job of the establishment and given them the space to explain how passionate they are about animals, they will remember how they responded to this question. If they say that they really care and they are going to take action, that is a positive affirmation for them, but the opposite is also true. Your goal is not to make people vegan, but give people the tools and the insights to help them make the decision themselves. The goal is complete when they can honestly tell you what they will do. Goal 3 is to make veganism a clear moral obligation. This is a closing statement, and it can be used at any time you feel like the conversation is no longer productive. The linked statement is, remember that until the day that you do go vegan, animals will be abused because of your choice. Please think about what your actions say about your values.
But yeah, just remember that until the day that it is you do go vegan, that animals will be abused because of your choice. So just think about what your actions say about your values. But thank you very much for the conversation.
They will obviously understand that the values they have told you should align with their actions, but we're not expecting them to do this immediately after. Simply by stating this, you're completing the goal. Goal 4 is to give them resources that will help them. Without actionable steps, the person is likely to forget about the experience they had with you. Use what you have learned about them to give personal recommendations that you think that would benefit them. The linked question is, can I give you some resources to help you? Or you can state that you're going to give them some resources to help them.
I'm going to leave you with this card. It will have pretty much like any resource that you'll need at the back there to make that decision. And also, sorry, I do record these conversations and I put them on my YouTube channel. I just wanted to let you know because you've been so honest with me. I really appreciate it and you've been really friendly and I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much, man. Cheers, you too.
Most of outreach is sharing insights and information to help people make better decisions by themselves. The end of this conversation is an opportunity to help them with more actionable resources that will help them with their development on this path. Remember to thank them for their time, because we should truly show gratitude to the people who stop and engage with us honestly, because most other people are walking by paying no attention. With these goals complete, you've done an amazing job as an outreacher. This may not mean the other person will go vegan on the spot, but they have everything that they need to be the person that they say they are. A special thank you to We the Three for sponsoring my production of this workshop. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have been able to put this much time into distilling all of the knowledge that I have and creating these resources for you. Since you understand the goals of what we are trying to achieve with each of these questions, now you can just focus on remembering the questions themselves. I've created a 4-minute refresher guide containing my outreach examples of the questions for you to watch just before events. Everything else you would possibly need to start these events is on the Notion wiki page linked below. Thank you for supporting and fighting for the victim's perspective.